Hey guys, my name is Brittany Huey and I'm the program manager at Alabama Lifespan Respite. Today I wanted to talk to you about the IRS of caregiving. So we're going to talk about information, respite, and support. So we've got objectives today, and those objectives are to define caregiver. So I'm going to tell you guys what Alabama Lifespan Respite's definition of a caregiver is. We have a lot of folks who don't identify as a caregiver, and it's important that they do, so they have access to the resources that they'll need. We're going to research some information needed to be successful in your caregiving role. So we've got to gather that information. We need to research, do our homework as a caregiver. We're going to define respite and its importance in relation to caregiving. And then we're going to figure out where we can find some support as a caregiver. So if you guys are ready, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so the most important thing, identifying as a caregiver. So Alabama Respite's definition of a caregiver is somebody providing unpaid care to a loved one with a special need, disability, chronic terminal, or a mental illness. So we also like to define a caregiver as Superman or Superwoman. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. So if you're in the home and you're providing around-the-clock care to that loved one with a special need or a disability, we need you guys to realize that you're not just mom or just dad, or you have to do this because it's a family member or a friend. We need to recognize that you are a caregiver. There are lots of resources out there that you guys can benefit from as a caregiver. So the first things first, we've got to get you to admit that you are in fact a caregiver. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about information, what kind of information, who, what, when, where, why, and how. All of those questions we need to know when we become a caregiver. So I'm sure a lot of you guys didn't wake up this morning or last year and say, I want to be a caregiver for the rest of my life. I'm sure it happened last minute's notice. You were not expecting this to happen. Something didn't go as planned. It could have been an accident. Typically, our caregivers don't wake up thinking that they are going to be caring for another life for the rest of theirs, right? Even as a parent, you have these expectations that, at some point, whether it's 30 or 35, your child is going to move on. They're going to take care of themselves, start their own lives, whatever that looks like, and that's not always the case. So what you guys need to know as a caregiver, some of the information you need to gather is about the diagnosis. So whoever you're caring for, whatever that diagnosis is, it is important that you research specific information dealing with that diagnosis. It's important that you guys are familiar with signs and symptoms that are related to this diagnosis as well. You need to learn the progression of the diagnosis, and that is only for you guys to have just a baseline of expectations. Again, that is only for you guys to have a baseline of expectations. As a caregiver, many of you guys already know this. You've got to be super flexible in your role as a caregiver. Things happen. We come across bumps in the road. We come across hills in the road. So we've got to realize that when we're doing all of our homework on this diagnosis, that sometimes things aren't going to go as planned. Okay, so this again, just getting your baseline for expectations specific to that diagnosis is important. All right, so we also need to know what is required of us as a caregiver. So some caregivers take, hot meals. They might go to the pharmacy and pick up medications and just drop those off. They might take somebody to a doctor's appointment every once in a while. And then you have those caregivers who are a little bit more involved. So those caregivers will be assisting with activities of daily living. So your bathing, your feeding, your medication management. And these caregivers are also going to have to learn how to navigate the social service system. So social service system might not even be familiar to you before you became a caregiver, but as you start going through the throes of this, you're going to need to learn how to navigate that social service system to get those resources that are out there and available for you as a caregiver. Sometimes that means you've got to figure out what is the right question for me to ask. That is all going to come back from, you doing your homework, your research on this diagnosis, what you might need as a caregiver. Emotional support is something that I'm going to say 1,000% caregivers are going to need. So please have that team in place, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it is a therapist or a counselor. Have somebody that you can talk to. Being a caregiver is very stressful, especially if you're doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You guys are going to need some relief. You're going to need to be able to process your feelings, the things that happened, relationships, all of those things that come with that caregiving package. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and this is not just for caregivers specifically. This is for anybody. Be prepared or prepare to fail, right? So if you're a student in high school or college and you've got a big test coming up, you know that you've got to what? You've got to study. So you can be prepared to pass that test. If we do not study, we can prepare. Most likely we are not going to do so hot on that test, right? So being a caregiver, being prepared, that is going to make your life go a little bit smoother than it would if you don't prepare at all. It is going to minimize your stress level. It's going to minimize burnout. And it just takes a little bit of preparation, okay? Again, you've got to be flexible. Not everything is going to go as planned 100% of the time. But if you are prepared and you know that, when something does come up, you'll be able to handle those things a little bit better. So, let's talk about respite. What is respite? So respite is just a temporary break from caregiving duties, okay? So this doesn't mean it is a 6-week-long vacation from caregiving. That would be fantastic if that can happen for you. But most of the time when we're talking about respite, we're talking about a couple of hours a day, maybe a couple hours a month. It might only happen 3 times a year. And there are many different ways that respite can happen, including it can happen in the home. I think that's the most traditional way that respite happens, is somebody comes into the home, relieves you, and you go and take care of what you need to take care of. Respite can happen at a church. There are several churches in Alabama who have respite nights. And then there's summer camps. So summer camps, when your kiddos are out of school, there are several different camps that they can attend that provide that opportunity for respite for you as a caregiver. And then there is adult daycare. So if you're taking care of mom or dad with Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, whatever that looks like, there are adult daycare centers. So you can drop your loved one off there for a few hours, get the break that you need, and then go back and pick your loved one up, right? So again, and I mentioned it a little bit before, part of being a caregiver is being flexible and creative. So right now, especially because of COVID-19 and our quarantine situation and self-distancing that we've got to put into practice, we can't necessarily have respite providers coming in the home right now, especially if we've got a loved one with a compromised immune system, a disability, whatever that looks like. So in order to get your break, the break that you desperately will need, especially in a time like this, you've got to be a little creative. So if that's going outside while your loved one takes a nap and you going for a walk, listening to music, if that's doing a daily devotional, if that is putting together puzzles or coloring, adult coloring books, you've got to figure out how to have time for yourself when you can't necessarily get away from the situation. There are all kinds of different activities right now that you could do. Self-care, please implement that into your daily life more than ever right now, because that is going to be a saving grace for you. So let's talk about why respite is so important. And of course, I only have a few ways listed right here on this slide. There are so many benefits to taking that break as a caregiver. So the first one I want to talk about is preventing stress and burnout. So if you guys are taking the break that you need, if you know that, the first Friday of every month, I get to drop my kiddos off at a church respite night. If you have that to look forward to, your days are going to go a little bit smoother. That stress is going to be minimal, and you're not going to reach that burnout stage, okay? It creates a healthy dynamic within the home. So we all know that if we're stressed out, we're not feeling good, we have so many things on our plate, our mood is a little bit shorter than normal, right? So our fuse might spark a little bit quicker than it normally would if we had that break. So if we've got, respite on the books, it's scheduled, you're doing that respite once a month, whatever it is, for yourself, that is going to create a healthier dynamic in your home. You are going to feel better, your loved one is going to feel better, and then that brings me down to this third bullet right here. You guys are going to experience better quality of life. So when our mood is better, everything seems to be better, right? Because our health is good right now. We've taken that break. We feel like we've had time to, relax, refresh, and we're getting back into the game. As a caregiver, you will be providing better quality of care to your loved one, and then in return, the care recipient is going to get that care. They're going to feel better. They're going to be in a better place. So it's really a win-win for both parties. It prevents resentment. So if you're able to take that break to pull yourself away, and guys, you're not the only one that needs a break. Your loved one probably would like to see somebody else also. So keep that in mind when you guys are taking that respite. It's good for both of you guys to have a break from each other. It does prevent that resentment. You don't feel like you're in this by yourself all the time. There is some relief for you. It prevents abuse and neglect. So those are ugly words. We see it all the time on the news, though. It happens, guys, especially if you're in the home with somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It might be unintentional abuse. It might be unintentional neglect. But because you're so stressed out, because you've reached the point that you're burnt out, because you haven't had respite. So please take care of yourself. It also lessens the opportunity of social isolation. So if you have the opportunity to take some respite, your loved one gets to see somebody else, they get to socialize with somebody else, you're out in the community, staying connected with the people that you love, the hobbies that you love, and staying connected in that way. Caregiving, caregivers in general are one of the most isolated populations there are. And isolation can lead to so many different things, such as, anxiety and depression, and it can go on. It create poor health for that caregiver. So please stay connected as much as you possibly can, and let your loved one also have that socialization with somebody different other than you. So let's talk about support. What I mean by support is giving approval, comfort, or encouragement to somebody else, right? So unfortunately, 50% of caregivers receive no outside help. Now, if we're looking at it from, glass half full, 50% of caregivers do receive outside help. But if we're talking about caregivers, we know that they need emotional support. We know that they need those connections with the community, and if they aren't receiving that outside help, I can imagine stress, burnout, all of those things are all too real in their household. So can you imagine, providing that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week care to somebody and not getting any help, and let me mention this too. A lot of our caregivers are also working full-time jobs right now. They also have to make sure that they are spending time with, their immediate family. A lot of these caregivers are in the sandwich generation too. So what I mean by that is they are providing care for mom or dad, and then they might also have a kiddo with a special need. So they are juggling a lot of things that requires outside help. So some options for our caregivers. So online right now is probably the best option due to COVID-19. We can't do a lot of gatherings right now because we're practicing social distancing. But there are online support groups. They have in-person support groups as well, and I'm sure those will pick back up once we get through this crisis period. Break is a support group that Alabama Lifespan Respite holds. We usually do it once a quarter. If you're interested in more information about that, if you're in the Madison County area, please shoot me an email, reach out to me, and when things pick back up, hopefully we'll have something scheduled so we can get back together. It'll be probably the best one because everybody is going to be so excited about being around other people. You've got churches who offer caregiver support options. They might have a caregiver ministry, or they might help with food, something like that. State agencies such as, I've got AAA in parentheses right here, that's the Area Agency on Aging. There are 13 CARES coordinators in the state of Alabama. So we've got, they cover different counties, and they are over the CARES, the Alabama CARES program. So that program helps with respite, it helps with medical supplies, and I think there are 2 other components. If you are interested to see if you qualify for a AAA, if you'll email me your name and what county you're in, I will tell you who your CARES coordinator is so you can reach out to that person. And then universities and community colleges. They're great places to reach out to see if they have nursing students, social work students, those students who need this hands-on experience before they get into the field. Call and see if they offer some kind of a program where they can come get that experience, and then you have a respite provider to give you that break that you need, and then also the care that your loved one needs. Church, family, and friends, stay connected to those friends that you've made at church, that church family. Let them know what you need. If they don't feel like they can, provide the bathing or the feeding or the dressing, there are other things that you guys can ask of that church family and those friends to do for you, so you don't feel like your plate is so heavy. Home health agencies offer respite as well. There are a ton of different options as far as home health agencies go. So if you just Google home health agencies and put your county or your city, they're going to pop up everywhere. And you can do your homework, your research, get that information you need on those home health agencies if that's the route that you choose. If you don't remember any of the other support options on this page, always remember 211. So it's a national number you can dial right off of your cell phone. It's almost like the Caregiver's 911, right? So if you dial 211, you'll tell them what your zip code is and what resource that you're looking for. So, for instance, if you're needing help with paying a light bill or you're needing assistance with hot meals, you'll tell them your need, and they are going to connect you with somebody within that zip code, your community, that offers that support. So if you even forget about Alabama Respite and you're looking for respite services, just dial 211 and say that, and they'll get you connected with us. So 211, okay? So we know as a caregiver sometimes respite is not accessible to us, right? So as a caregiver, for our mental health, our physical health, spiritual health, what can we do at home when we don't have that actual break to make sure that we are okay? So learn and practice some coping skills. So coping skills include deep breathing, distraction techniques, progressive muscle relaxation. If you Google any one of those 3 bullets, deep breathing, distraction techniques, or progressive muscle relaxation, again, there will be tons of options and varieties that you can choose from. The most important thing about these coping skills, though, is to be intentional about what you're doing. We want you as the caregiver to automatically go to that coping skills response versus a negative response, right? We don't want you to be overwhelmed. We don't want you to be so stressed out that you can't handle the situation that you're in. So you have to practice these coping skills just like you practice, volleyball or basketball or, speaking in front of people, whatever that is, you've got to practice. Practice makes perfect. So if you implement practice and you're intentional about doing these coping skills on a daily basis, the more likely you will react in a more positive way in a stressful situation. Stay connected to folks, okay? Let them know what's going on. Ask for that assistance. I mentioned in the slide before, they might not feel comfortable with the bathing or the feeding, but they can do the grocery shopping. They can go pick up some medications. And those small little tasks during your day, no matter how little they seem in the grand scheme of things, they are going to minimize your stress level because it's one less thing that you have to do. And as a caregiver, there is a lot to do, especially when you're making sure you're taking care of yourself first, right? Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. People might not do it exactly the same way that you do it, but if it gets done and we're achieving a healthy environment, that's all that really matters. I have listed some informational resources here for caregivers specifically. This is good for professionals as well, if I have any professionals listening. Family Caregiver Alliance is the National Center on Caregiving. Caregiver.org, and then you see AlabamaRespite.org on the last little link, the last bullet right there. That's us again. If you don't remember any of these things and you want to jot down our website, we will try to get you connected to the resource that you're looking for if we can't help specifically. So I have put my email address up right here. It is bhuey@ucphuntsville.org. That's mine, so that's Brittany Huey at ucphuntsville.org. You guys reach out to me if you have any questions, if you want any specifics on the services that Alabama Lifespan Respite offers, I can get that information over to you. If you're interested in our respite reimbursement program, I can get that application over to you. I hope you guys will use this. Will be intentional about taking care of yourself, especially if you're in this caregiving situation. And I look forward to hearing from some of you guys.